cuties! Welcome to Comfy Stories with HIMA. Smoke and Mirrors, Short Fictions and Illusions by Neil Gaiman. This was suggested by Waffle. Reading the Entrails, a Rondel. I mean, she said, that one can't help growing older. One can't, perhaps, said Humpty Dumpty, but two can. With proper assistance, you might have left off at 7. Which is a quote from Lewis Carroll Through the Looking Glass. They'll call it chance, or luck, or call it fate. The cards and stars that tumble as they will. Tomorrow manifests and brings the bill for every kiss and kill, the small and great. You want to know the future, love? Then wait. I'll answer your impatient questions. Still, they'll call it chance or luck or call it fate. The cards and stars that will tumble as they will. I'll come to you tonight, dear, when it's late. You will not see me. You may feel a chill. I'll wait until you sleep, then take my fill. And that will be your future on a plate. They'll call it chance, or luck, or call it fate. An introduction. Writing is flying in dreams. When you remember, when you can, when it works. It's that easy. Author's Notebook, February 1992. They do it with mirrors. It's a cliche, of course, but it's also true. Magicians have been using mirrors, usually set at a 45-degree angle, ever since the Victorians began to manufacture reliable, clear mirrors in quantity well over 100 years ago. John Neville Maskelyne began it in 1862 with a wardrobe that, thanks to a cunningly placed mirror, concealed more than it revealed. Mirrors are wonderful things, and they appear to tell the truth, to reflect life back out at us, but set a mirror correctly and it will lie so convincingly you'll believe that something has vanished into thin air, that a box filled with doves and flags and spiders is actually empty, that people hidden in the wings or the pit are floating ghosts upon the stage. Angle it right and a mirror becomes a magic casement. It can show you anything you can imagine, and maybe a few things that you can't. The smoke blurs the edges of things. Stories are, in one way or another, mirrors. We use them to explain to ourselves how the world works or how it doesn't work. Like mirrors, stories prepare us for the day to come. They distract us from the things in the darkness. Fantasy, and all fiction is fantasy of one kind or another, is a mirror, a distorting mirror, to be sure, and a concealing mirror set at 45 degrees to reality, but it's a mirror nonetheless, which we can use to tell ourselves things that we might not otherwise see. Fairy tales, as G.K. Chesterton once said, were more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be defeated. Winter started today. The sky turned gray, and the snow began to fall, and it did not stop falling until well after dark. I sat in the darkness and watched the snow falling, and the flakes glistened and glimmered as they spun into light and out again, and I wondered about where stories came from. This is the kind of thing that you wonder about when you make things up for a living. I remained unconvinced that it is the kind of activity that is a fit occupation of an adult. But it's too late now. I seem to have a career that I enjoy which doesn't involve getting up too early in the morning. When I was a child, adults would tell me not to make things up, warning me of what would happen if I did. As far as I can tell so far, it seems to involve lots of foreign travel and not having to get up too early in the morning. Most of the stories written in this book were written to entertain the various editors who had asked me for tales for specific anthologies. It's for an anthology of stories about the Holy Grail, about sex, of fairy stories retold for adults, about sex and horror, of revenge stories, about superstition, and about more sex. A few of them are written to amuse myself, or more precisely, to get an idea or an image out of my head and pinned safely down on paper, which is a good as reason for writing as I know. Releasing demons, letting them fly. Some of the stories begin in idleness, fancies, and curiosities that got out of hand. It's made up a story as a wedding present, for some friends. It was about a couple who were given a story as a wedding present. It was not a reassuring story. Having made up the story, I decided that they'd probably prefer a toaster, so I got them a toaster, and to this day have not written the story down. It sits in the back of my head to this day, waiting for someone to get married who would appreciate it. It occurs to me now, writing this introduction in blue-black fountain pen ink in a black-bound notebook, in case you were wondering, that although one way or another, most of the stories in this book are about love in some form or another, there aren't enough happy stories of properly requited love, to balance out all the other kinds you'll find in this book, and indeed, that there are people who don't read introductions. For that matter, some of you out there may be having weddings one day after all. So for all of you who do read introductions, here's a story I did not write. And if I don't like the story once it's written, I can always cross out this paragraph, and you'll never know that I stopped writing the introduction to start writing a story instead. The wedding present. After all the joys and the headaches of the wedding, after the madness and the magic of it all, not to mention the embarrassment of Belinda's father's after-dinner speech, complete with family slideshow, after the honeymoon was literally, although not yet metaphorically, over, and before their new suntans had a chance to fade in the English autumn, Belinda and Gordon got down to the business of unwrapping wedding presents and writing their thank you letters. Thank yous enough for every towel and every toaster, for the juicer and the bread maker, for the cutlery and the crockery and the teas made and the curtains. Right, said Gordon. That's the large objects thank you'd. What have we got left? Things in envelopes, said Belinda. Checks, I hope. There were several checks, a number of gift tokens, and even a $10 book token from Gordon's Aunt Marie, who was poor as a church mouse. Gordon told Belinda, but a dear, and who had sent him a book token every birthday as long as he could remember. And then at the very bottom of the pile, there was a large, brown, businesslike envelope. What is it? Asked Belinda. Gordon opened the flap and pulled out a sheet of paper the color of 2-day-old cream, ragged at top and bottom, with typing on one side. The words had been typed with a manual typewriter, something Gordon had not seen in some years. He read the pages slowly. What is it? Asked Belinda. Who's it from? I don't know, said Gordon. Someone who still owns a typewriter. It's not signed. Is it a letter? Not exactly, he said, and he scratched the side of his note and read it again. Well, she said in an exasperated voice, but she was not really exasperated. She was happy. She would wake up in the morning and check to see if she were still as happy as she had been when she went to sleep the night before. Or when Gordon had woken her up in the night by brushing up against her, or when she had woken him. And she was. Well, what is it? It appears to be a description of our wedding, he said. It's very nicely written. Here. And he passed it to her. And she looked it over. It was a crisp day in early October when Gordon Robert Johnson and Belinda Karen Abingdon swore that they would love each other, would support and honor each other as long as they both should live. The bride was radiant and lovely. The groom was nervous, but obviously proud and just as obviously pleased. That was how it began. It went on to describe the service and the reception clearly, simply and amusing. How sweet, she said. What does it say on the envelope? Gordon and Belinda's wedding, he read. No name? Nothing to indicate who sent it? Uh-huh. Well, it's very sweet. It's very thoughtful, she said, whoever it's from. She looked inside the envelope to see if there was something else inside that they had overlooked. A note from whichever one of her friends, or his or theirs, had written it. But there wasn't. So vaguely relieved that there was one less thank you note to write, she placed the green sheet of paper back in the envelope, which she placed in a box file along with a copy of the wedding banquet menu, and the invitations, and the contact sheets for the wedding photographs, and one white rose from the bridal bouquet. Gordon was an architect, and Belinda was a vet. For each of them, what they did was a vocation, not a job. They were in their early 20s. Neither of them had been married before, nor even seriously involved with anyone. They met when Gordon brought his 13-year-old golden retriever, Goldie, gray-muzzled and half-paralyzed, to Belinda's surgery to be put down. He had had the dog since he was a boy and insisted on being with her at the end. Belinda held his hand as he cried, and then suddenly and unprofessionally, she hugged him tightly, as if she could squeeze away the pain and the loss and the grief. One of them asked the other if they could meet that evening in the local pub for a drink, and afterward, neither of them was sure which of them had proposed it. The most important thing to know about the first 2 years of their marriage was this. They were pretty happy. From time to time, they would squabble, and every once in a while, they would have a blazing row about nothing very much that would end in tearful reconciliation. And they would make love and kiss away the other's tears and whisper heartfelt apologies into each other's ears. At the end of the second year, 6 months after she came off the pill, Brenda found herself pregnant. Gordon bought her a bracelet studded with tiny rubies, and he turned the spare bedroom into a nursery, hanging the wallpaper himself. The wallpaper was covered with nursery rhyme characters with Little Bo Peep, Humpty Dumpty, and the dish running away with the spoon, over and over and over again. Belinda came home from the hospital with little Melanie in her carry cot, and Belinda's mother came to stay with them for a week, sleeping on the sofa in the lounge. It was on the third day that Belinda pulled out the box file to show her wedding souvenirs to her mother and to reminisce. Already their wedding seemed like such a long time ago. They smiled at the dried brown thing that had once been a white rose and clucked over the menu and invitation. At the bottom of the box was a large brown envelope. Gordon and Belinda's marriage, read Belinda's mother. It's a description of our wedding, said Belinda. It's very sweet. It even has a bit in it about Daddy's slideshow. Belinda opened the envelope and pulled out the sheet of cream paper. She read what was typed upon the paper and made a face. Then she put it away without saying anything. Can't I see it, dear? Asked her mother. I think it's Gordon playing a joke, said Belinda. Not in good taste either. Belinda was sitting up in bed that night, breastfeeding Melanie, when she said to Gordon, who was staring at his wife and new dollar with a foolish smile upon his face, Darling, why did you write those things? What things? In the letter, wedding thing, you know. I don't know. It wasn't funny. He sighed. What are you talking about? Belinda pointed to the box file, which she had brought upstairs and placed upon her dressing table. Gordon opened it and took out the envelope. Did it always say that on the envelope? envelope? He asked. I thought it said something about our wedding. Then he took out and read the single sheet of ragged edged paper, and his forehead creased. I didn't write this. He turned the paper over, staring at the blank side as if expecting to see something else written there. You didn't write it? She asked. Really? You didn't? Gordon shook his head. Belinda wiped the dribble of milk from the baby's chin. I believe you, she said. I thought you wrote it, but you didn't. No. Let me see that again, she said. He passed the paper to her. This is so weird. I mean, it's not funny, and it's not even true. Typed upon the paper was a brief description of the previous 2 years for Gordon and Belinda. It had not been a good 2 years, according to the typed sheet. 6 months after they were married, Belinda had been bitten in the cheek by a Pekingese, so badly that the cheek needed to be stitched back together. It had left a nasty scar. Worse than that, nerves had been damaged and she had begun to drink, perhaps to numb the pain. She suspected that Gordon was revolted by her face, while the new baby, it said, was a desperate attempt to glue the couple together. Why would they say this? She asked. They? Whoever wrote this horrid thing. She ran a finger across her cheek. It was unblemished and unmarked. She was a very beautiful young woman, although she looked tired and fragile now. How do you know it's a they? I don't know, she said, transferring the baby. It seems a sort of they-ish thing to do. To write that and to swap it for the old one and to wait until one of us read it? Come on, little Melanie. There you go. That's such a fine girl. Shall I throw it away? Yes. No, I don't know. I think... She stroked the baby's forehead. Hold on to it, she said. We might need it for evidence. I wonder if it was something Al organized. Al was Gordon's youngest brother. Gordon put the paper back into the envelope, and he put the envelope back into the box file, which was pushed under the bed and more or less forgotten. Neither of them got much sleep for the next few months, what with the nightly feedings and the continual crying. For Melanie was a colicky baby. The box file had stayed under the bed. And then Gordon was offered a job in Preston, several 100 miles north. And since Belinda was on leave from her job and had no immediate plans to go back to work, she found the idea rather attractive. So they moved. They found a terraced house on a cobbled street, high and old and deep. Belinda filled in from time to time at a local vet's, seeing small animals and house pets. When Melanie was 18 months old, Belinda gave birth to a son, whom they called Kevin after Gordon's late grandfather. Gordon was made a full partner in the firm of architects. When Kevin began to go to kindergarten, Belinda went back to work. The box file was never lost. It was in one of the spare rooms at the top of the house, beneath a teetering pile of copies of The Architect's Journal and Architectural Review. Belinda thought about the box file and what it contained from time to time, and one night when Gordon was in Scotland overnight consulting on the remodeling of an ancestral home, she did more than think. Both of the children were asleep. Belinda went up to the stairs into the undecorated part of the house. She moved the magazines and opened the box, which, where it had not been covered by magazines, was thick with 2 years of undisturbed dust. Envelope still said Gordon and Belinda's marriage on it, and Belinda honestly did not know if it had ever said anything else. She took out the paper from the envelope and she read it. And then she put it away and sat there at the top of the house, feeling shaken and sick. According to the neatly typed message, Kevin, her second child, had not been born. The baby had been miscarried at 5 months. Since then, Belinda had been suffering from frequent attacks of bleak, black depression. Gordon was home rarely, it said, because he was conducting a rather miserable affair with the senior partner in his company, a striking but nervous woman 10 years his senior. Belinda was drinking more and affecting high collars and scarves to hide the spiderweb scar upon her cheek. She and Gordon spoke little, except to argue the small and petty arguments of those who feared the big arguments, knowing that the only things that were left to be said were too huge to be said without destroying both their lives. Hey Les, I'm crashing on your couch. Belinda said nothing about the latest version of Gordon and Belinda's marriage to Gordon. However, he read it himself, or something like that, several months later when Belinda's mother fell ill, and Belinda went south for a week to help look after her. On the sheet of paper that Gordon took out of the envelope was a portrait of a marriage similar to the one Belinda had read, although at present, his affair with his boss had ended badly, and his job was now in peril. Gordon rather liked his boss, but could never imagine himself ever becoming romantically involved with her. He was enjoying his job, although he wanted something that would challenge him more than it did. Belinda's mother improved, and Belinda came home again. Within the week, her husband and children were relieved and delighted to see her. It was Christmas Eve before Gordon spoke to Belinda about the envelope. You've looked at it too, haven't you? They had crept into the children's bedroom earlier that evening and filled the hanging Christmas stockings. Gordon had felt euphoric as he had walked through the house, as he stood beside his children's beds, but it was a euphoria tinged with a profound sorrow. The knowledge that such moments of complete happiness could not last, that one could not stop time. Belinda knew what he was talking about. Yes, she said. I've read it. What do you think? Well, she said, I don't think it's a joke anymore. Not even a sick joke. He said. Then what is it? He sat in the living room at the front of the house with the lights dimmed and the log burning on the bed of coals cast flickering orange and yellow light about the room. I think it really is a wedding present, she told him. It's the marriage that we aren't having. The bad things are happening there on the page, not here in our lives. Instead of living it, we're reading it, knowing it could have gone that way, and also that it never did. You're saying it's magic then? He would not have said it aloud, but it was Christmas Eve and the lights were down. I don't believe in magic, she said flatly. It's a wedding present, and I think we should make sure it's kept safe. On Boxing Day, she moved the envelope from the box file to her jewelry drawer, which she kept locked, where it lay flat beneath her necklace and rings and her bracelets and her brooches. Spring became summer, winter became spring. Gordon was exhausted. By day, he worked for clients, designing and liaising with builders and contractors. By night, he would sit up late, working for himself, designing museums and galleries and public buildings for competitions. Sometimes his designs received honorable mentions and were reproduced in architectural journals. Belinda was doing more large animal work, which she enjoyed, visiting farmers and inspecting and treating horses, sheep, and cows. Sometimes she would bring the children with her on her rounds. 1 second. Her mobile phone rang when she was in a paddock trying to examine a pregnant goat who had, it turned out, no desire to be caught. let alone be examined. She retired from the battle, leaving the goat glaring at her from across the field, and thumbed the phone open. Yes? Guess what? Hello, darling. You've won the lottery? Nope, close though. My design for the British Heritage Museum has made the shortlist. I'm up against some pretty stiff contenders though, but I'm on the shortlist. That's wonderful. I've spoken to Mrs. Fulbright, and she's going to have Sonia babysit for us tonight. We're celebrating. Terrific. Love you, she said. Now gotta get back to the goat. They drank too much champagne over a fine celebratory meal. That night in their bedroom, as Belinda removed her earrings, she said, "Shall we see what the wedding present says?" He looked at her gravely from the bed. He was only wearing his socks. No, I don't think so. It's a special night. Why spoil it? She placed her earrings in her jewelry drawer and then locked it. Then she removed her stockings. I suppose you're right. I can imagine what it says anyway. I'm drunk and depressed and you're a miserable loser. And meanwhile, well, actually, I am a bit diddly. That's not what I mean. It just sits there at the bottom of the drawer, like the portrait in the attic in the picture of Dorian Gray. And it was only by his rings that they knew him. Yes, I remember. We read it in school. That's what I'm really scared of, she said, pulling on a cotton nightdress. That the thing on that paper is the real portrait of our marriage at present, and what we've got now is just a pretty picture. That it's real, and we're not. I mean, she was speaking intently now, with the gravity of the slightly drunk. Don't you ever think that it's too good to be true? He nodded. Sometimes. Tonight, certainly. She shivered. Maybe really I am a drunk with a dog bite on my cheek. And you fuck anything that moves, and Kevin was never born. And all that other horrible stuff. He stood up, walked over to her, put his arms around her. But it isn't true, he pointed out. This is real. You're real. I'm real. That wedding thing is just a story. It's just words. And he kissed her and held her tightly, and little more was said that night. It was a long 6 months before Gordon's design for the British Heritage Museum was announced as the winning design, although it was derided in the Times as being too aggressively modern, and various architectural journals as being too old-fashioned. It was described by one of the judges in an interview in the Sunday Telegraph as a bit of a compromise candidate, everybody's second choice. They moved to London, letting their house in Preston to an artist in his family, for Belinda would not let Gordon sell it. Gordon worked intensively, happily on the museum project. Kevin was 6 and Melanie was 8. Melanie found London intimidating, but Kevin loved it. Both of the children were initially distressed to have lost their friends in their school. Belinda found a part-time job at a small animal clinic in Camden, working 3 afternoons a week. She missed her cows. Days in London became months and then years, and despite occasional budgetary setbacks, Gordon was increasingly excited. The day approached when the first ground would be broken for the museum. One night, Belinda woke in the small hours and she stared at her sleeping husband in the sodium yellow illumination of the street lamp outside their bedroom window. His hairline was receding and the hair at back was thinning. Belinda wondered what it would be like when she was actually married to a bald man. She decided it would be much the same as it always had been. Mostly happy, mostly good. She wondered what was happening to them in the envelope. She could feel its presence, dry and brooding, in the corner of the bedroom, safely locked away from all harm. She felt suddenly sorry for the Belinda and Gordon trapped in the envelope. On their piece of paper, hating each other and everything else. Gordon began to snore. She kissed him gently on the cheek and said, "Shh." He stirred and was quiet, but did not wake. She snuggled against him and soon fell back into sleep herself. After lunch the following day, while in conversation with an importer of Tuscan marble, Gordon looked very surprised and reached a hand up to his chest. He said, "I'm frightfully sorry about this," and then his knees gave way and he fell to the floor. They called an ambulance, but Gordon was dead when it arrived. He was 36 years old. At the inquest, the coroner announced that the autopsy showed Gordon's heart to have been congenitally weak. It could have gone at any time. For the first 3 days after his death, Belinda felt nothing, a profound and awful nothing. She comforted the children, she spoke to her friends, and to Gordon's friends, and to her family, and to Gordon's family, accepting their condolences gracefully and gently. As one accepts unasked for gifts, she would listen to people cry for Gordon, which she still had not done. She would say all the right things, and she would feel nothing at all. Melanie, who was 11, seemed to be taking it well. Kevin abandoned his books and computer games and sat in his bedroom, staring out of the window, not wanting to talk. The day after the funeral, her parents went back to the countryside, taking both the children with them. Belinda refused to go. There was, she said, too much to do. On the 4th day after the funeral, she's making the double bed that she and Gordon had shared when she began to cry, and the sobs ripped through her in huge, ugly spasms of grief, and tears fell from her face onto the bedspread, and clear snot streamed from her nose, and she sat down on the floor suddenly, like a marionette whose strings had been cut, and she cried for the best part of an hour. She knew that she would never see him again. She wiped her face, and then she unlocked her jewelry drawer and took out the envelope and opened it. She pulled out the cream-colored sheet of paper and ran her eyes over the neatly typed words. The Belinda on the paper had crashed their car while drunk, was about to lose her driving license. She and Gordon had not spoken for days. He had lost his job almost 18 months earlier and now spent most of his days sitting around their house in Salford. Belinda's job brought in what money they had. Melanie was out of control. Belinda, cleaning Melanie's bedroom, had found a cache of 5 and 10-pound notes. Melanie had offered no explanation for how an 11-year-old girl had come by the money, had just retreated into her room and glared at them, tight-lipped, when quizzed. Neither Gordon nor Belinda had investigated further, scared of what they might have discovered. The house in Salford was dingy and damp, such that the plaster was coming away from the ceiling in huge crumbling chunks, and all 3 of them had developed nasty bronchial coughs. Belinda felt sorry for them. She put the paper back in the envelope. She wondered what it would be like to hate Gordon, to have him hate her. She wondered what it would be like not to have Kevin in her life, not to see his drawings of airplanes or hear his magnificently tuneless renditions of popular songs. She wondered where Melanie, the other Melanie, not her Melanie, but the there but for the grace of God Melanie, could have got that money, and was relieved that her own Melanie seemed to have few interests beyond ballet and Enid Blyton books. She missed Gordon so much it felt like something sharp being hammered into her chest. A spike, perhaps, or an icicle made of cold and loneliness and the knowledge that she would never see him again in this world. Then she took the envelopes downstairs to the lounge, where the coal fire was burning in the grate, because Gordon had loved open fires. He said that a fire gave room life. She disliked cold fires, but she had lit it this evening out of routine and out of habit. and because not lighting it would have meant admitting to herself on some absolute level that he was never coming home. Belinda stared into the fire for some time, thinking about what she had in her life and what she had given up, and whether it would be worse to love someone who was no longer there or not to love someone who was. And then at the end, almost casually, she tossed the envelope onto the coals, and she watched it curl and blacken and catch. Watched the yellow flames dancing amidst the blue. Soon the wedding present was nothing but black flakes of ash, which danced on the updrafts and were carried away like a child's letter to Santa Claus, up the chimney and off into the night. Belinda sat back in her chair, closed her eyes, and waited for the scar to blossom on her cheek. And that is the story I did not write for my friend's wedding. Although, of course, it's not the story I did not write, or even the story I set out to write when I began it some pages ago. The story I thought I was setting out to write was much shorter, much more fable-like, and it did not end like that. I don't know how it did end originally anymore. There was some kind of ending, but once the story was underway, the real ending became inevitable. Most of the stories in this volume have that much in common. The place they arrived at in the end was not the place I was expecting them to go when I set out. Sometimes the only way I would know that a story had finished was when there weren't any more words to be written down. Editors who ask me for stories about anything you want, honest, anything at all, just write the story you always wanted to write. Rarely get anything at all. In this case, Lawrence Schimmel wrote asking for a poem to introduce his anthology of stories about foretelling the future. He wanted one of the verse forms with repeating lines like a villain or villanelle or a pantom to echo the way we inevitably arrive at our future. So I wrote him a roundel about the pleasures and perils of fortune telling and prefaced it with the bleakest joke hidden through the looking glass. Somehow it seemed a fine starting point for this book. And that's the beginning. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming, everybody. I appreciate you. I hope you actually did enjoy it. This is something I'll do again. I'll probably do it a few times to see how it goes, kind of a thing. But yeah, thanks so much. Have a good night. Have a sweet dreams tonight. Get lots of rest. And I'll see you guys tomorrow night, okay? Night night. Sweet dreams. See you later. And bye bye. Bye.
Not even if I tried. There's not a person I care for in this whole world like I do you.
What are you trying to tell me?
Teresa, I love you. How do you feel about me?
How do I feel?
I have to know, just for this moment, what I was to you.